So for my book, I then began to look at a whole bunch of different kind of models or matrices or philosophical idea systems to think about what this dimensional shift means and how we could kind of conceptualize it and sort of bring it down to earth so we can kind of hold it and integrate it with our own lives and our own perspective and what that kind of means. And one way, as I mentioned, was this notion of apocalypse. And I read some really great Jungian books by the disciple of Jung, Edinger. One is called Archetypes of the Apocalypse. And he really sees the apocalypse as an event in the psyche. He thinks that it's it represents the coming, the self-realization of human consciousness, where you integrate all of the kind of shadow material, the dark and the light, so you don't have to project it anymore. But at first you have to go through that projection situation, which is what we seem to be doing right now. On a global scale, we're just constantly projecting our shadow deeper and deeper into the material world and into socio-political conflicts and so on. So we're not able to really reconcile our situation. So part of the apocalypse would be, this revealing process. And if you look at the Book of Revelation, in a way, it's really like a tantric text. There are all these, really intense imagery, like the angels who are dropping these kind of, vials of wrath are doing it from golden bowls. And the whore of Babylon drinks the disgusting filth of her fornication from a golden cup, which symbolizes kind of the vessel of the higher self. So it seems to be pointing out that you have to just work with all levels of the psyche and all levels of the shadow material and really do the work to integrate that. So then also I got really interested in the whole idea of the Kali Yuga, which is from Hinduism. And according to Hinduism, there are 4 ages. There's a golden age, silver age, a bronze age, and an iron age. And each one is progressively shorter and faster and sort of darker than the previous one. And they say that we're in the Kali Yuga, which is the age of materialism and kind of destruction. And Kali is the goddess of sort of destruction. She's the sort of wrathful entity who's dancing on a corpse, and she liberates through decapitating. And then I also got interested in the idea that Kali is also the wrathful manifestation of the goddess Shakti, which is the sort of deity of energy, especially sexual energy, in any form of manifestation. And her consort is Shiva, who represents kind of universal consciousness, which is like the masculine principle. And it's their union which kind of holds reality together. It's in the book. It's lengthy to explain, but it seems to me like that the Kali energy that's really part of our culture has to be deeply kind of interrogated and understood. And one way to think about it is if you think about archetypes, when we have this notion of that our culture is materialistic, and the word materialism, the root of that word is mater, which means mother. But it's like we've taken the sort of negative side of the mother archetype. So instead of nurturing, it's kind of aggrieved, possessive, enraged, and so we've created these systems. We've inherited these systems of kind of false nurturing or artificial nurturing, which are trying to constantly fill the void that's lacking because people didn't get this actual nurturing. So you have like fast food or sugar and starch substitutes. In every way, it's the culture's kind of shorting out gratification. And so I think that the sort of understanding this kind of Kali energy is really, really important in how it manifests in personal lives and personal relationships, and really trying to kind of bring Shakti back into balance. Is really intense work that everybody here is involved with, whether they know it or not. So then also I got interested in the Hopis, who talk about this period being the transition from one world to another. They say that this is the 4th world, and that we're moving into the 5th world, and there have been 3 previous worlds. It's more complicated than that because, in a sense, for them, all time is happening at the same time. They just have a different vision of time than we do, which is embedded in their language in a way. And the Mayans and the Aztecs similarly talked about this being the age of the 5th sun transitioning to the 6th sun. And the Aztecs, who kind of inherited the Mayan culture but kind of debased and degraded it, were doing huge amounts of human sacrifice at the end of their empire. I think as much as like 50 or 70,000 people a year, and they were doing this in order to keep the sun alive. They felt that if they didn't do all the sacrifice, the sun would simply go out, and then they'd enter this transition period into the sixth sun. So then I also got starting from my first book, got very involved in the ideas of Rudolf Steiner, who was an Austrian clairvoyant and visionary philosopher, who is just absolutely extraordinary and I think very, very important. I really feel that his ideas are going to be like as important for our time as Nietzsche's were for the 20th century, really giving us a different foundation and just an approach to reality on so many levels. But Steiner basically said that he realized that the mission of his life on Earth was to bring the knowledge of reincarnation back to the West, and this knowledge had been lost since the beginning of Christianity, and that just as Tibetan Buddhists talk about, where they recognize these lamas who keep coming back in life after life, that had also been going on in the West because we'd lost the knowledge and the understanding, and it had been happening without people recognizing it. So he did these books called Karmic Relationships, where he would track particular Western individualities back through a whole series of lives. And Steiner also said that not only do human beings reincarnate again and again, but the Earth itself reincarnates, and that this is the fourth incarnation of the Earth. That was his theme song, in fact, actually. That this is the fourth incarnation of the Earth, moving towards the fifth incarnation. And he was very interesting that he actually elaborated some of the ways he thought the sort of physical organism and the spiritual organism would shift as we moved into this next incarnation of the Earth. And yeah, I mean, there's a lot of stuff about Steiner which is just totally amazing. I mean, one thing that relates to this mind thing for me is that he really conceived of the planets as not just being like hunks of matter kind of rolling around out there. They were more like kind of vibrational matrices or kind of other modalities of consciousness that were in a kind of harmonic relationship to the Earth. This is very alchemical. Like the alchemists talk about Mars representing certain forces and energies, and Venus representing certain forces and energies. And in terms of the Mayan calendar stuff, there's a lot about Venus and some about Mars that are significant. These two big Venus transits, one was in 2004, another I think it's right around 2012, that are kind of representing this kind of complex rebalancing of male and female energies, which I think is one of the key things that is sort of going on right now on the planet, and also one thing that everybody is sort of having to deal with and struggle with in their own personal lives. When I read that, I mean, it may sound kind of hokey at first, but then if you look at like the relationship, for instance, between like the Earth and the Venus, their orbital relationships are incredibly harmonic. I think like I don't think I'm going to remember this right now, but there's basically these incredible phi-based relationships between the Earth and Venus. And I think Venus turns very, very slowly on its axis, so that one day on Venus is exactly 2/3 of an Earth year. And the way Venus approaches the Earth, when it's at its closest point, it always turns this same face to us, and it's in this perfect, like, phi-based relationship. And that's why, for the ancients, Venus was the planet of beauty, because it had this incredible harmonic relationship to the Earth. I also studied this philosopher, Jean Gebser, who was a German philosopher who published a huge book in the 50s. It was his life's work called The Ever-Present Origin. And he also was very interested, I mean, for him, he saw it as the evolution of human consciousness in terms of shifts or mutations into different consciousness structures. And that there had been several previous ones in the past, which he called the archaic and the magic, the mythical, and then what we were in now was the mental rational consciousness structure, which had kind of subdivided reality in a very certain way, and created a kind of linear model of time which didn't really exist before. I mean, history is a kind of modern conception. Like the mythical civilizations had no conception of history as we conceive of it. They were conceiving of cycles, or kind of spirals. So Gebser theorized that there was going to be a movement at a kind of crisis of anxiety. There would be a movement from this mental rational consciousness structure into what he called the integral or aperspectival consciousness, which would be a different form of consciousness that kind of had a different relationship to time. just to elaborate on that a little bit, he talked about how